have been so dear to me, I'd have locked my heart in a golden locket.
One of the great treasures that we have in Western North Carolina, and indeed probably in the whole United States, is Dr. Betty Smith, and she's right here. Betty, I have to ask you immediately, do you remember the moment you heard that you were going to be given the honorary doctorate at Mars Hill? What was that like?
Well, it was unbelievable. That's what it was.
Did Dr. Lunsford call you, or how did that happen?
Let's see. I think that I had a letter first. Yep.
And I remember that vividly.
He wrote a letter first.
You told me very quickly after you had heard about it. I had already heard on campus that it was going to happen, and so I was delighted to know that it had officially taken place. I remember the night that it actually happened.
I do too.
In December of 2008. Moore Auditorium was packed to the gills.
Yes, and when I came off stage, there were two folks there, you and Dr. Harley Jolly, and both of you called out, "Dr. Smith," like you were going to be the first ones to call me that.
Title. Well, it's a lovely honor, Betty, and it was
Yes.
absolutely appropriate and a great recognition of a great career in all the work you've done, not only as an educator, but as a singer, as a musician where you just play, and then also, as a playwright. And most people don't know that part about your career because you sort of don't talk about that very much.
Oh, I talk about all the help you gave me.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit when we talk about Jane Gentry. I know that you and Bill first came to the mountains. You actually were coming here before you moved here.
Oh, long before. I started coming to the Asheville Festival. We think it was about 1964, 65, that I came up for the music. And that's not when we started coming, it's when I started singing on the Mountain Dance and Folk Festival. And I never been able to just walk up and say, "May I sing on your festival?" I wrote a letter to Bascom Lunsford, and I sent a tape, and I sent Barbara Allen, because that was my grandmother's Baby Rockin' song, and I sent Omi Wise, and my other grandmother's her grandfather was the sheriff who arrested Jonathan Lewis, who murdered little Omi Wise. So I sent those two on a tape, and he told me to come.
And you did. You came to that festival, and did you? I believe you mentioned one time that he arranged the performers in an order that he knew that part of as it became a radio show, the ones who had the most clout were the ones playing for the radio slot.
Well, they went on the radio about 7 o'clock. So if he didn't know you, you might be put on before 7 o'clock, before they went on the air. And Joe Bly, who was one of the masters of ceremony, he would say you had to be on the left-hand side the first time, and then they'd see, and then you might be on the right side. So he said I was only on the left side one time. So that
meant that you were really up from at the very beginning.
He said I was okay. So
that was it.
But it was a wonderful way to do. Sometimes I think that we don't progress like we ought to. They had a big stage platform out in front for the dancers, and so the microphones for the singers were on either side of the stage, so they never had to move microphones around.
So you just moved to the microphone?
You just went to the microphone.
So you sat there the whole time?
And since that was, we sat with our families on the stage. Everybody sat on the stage. And you didn't know when you were going on. He'd just let you know a little bit ahead of time. But it was so nice because now you have to move mics because of the dancers being on the same floor as the microphones are. Then that was a separate little stage.
Now this was in the building which is now the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium. Is that correct?
Well, it was in the old one.
The old one.
Yeah.
The old building.
And people sat. You know, I don't like dark auditoriums.
Yeah.
I like to see people's faces. Well, they would sit all around that stage so that you could see faces, because they tend to cut out the lights in those big auditoriums, you know.
Well, now in Diana Wortham, where it has moved, it's a much smaller venue, and the performers have to be backstage now, right? Pretty
We
much.
can't even be in the auditorium. They don't have room for us.
That's right. There's not enough room for everybody. So you're not even able to be seen until you actually get out there and perform. How did you and Bill decide to come and build your house in Hot Springs? What was the impetus for that?
We got transferred to the Atlanta area. Bill worked for Hewlett-Packard, and they moved their southern office from High Point to Atlanta. They built the first building on 285 that goes around Atlanta, and so we said, how are we going to get back to North Carolina? And so we bought that piece of land. Clay Smathers, you remember the Smathers family band from Canton?
Really?
That was his wife's brother. We bought it from his wife's brother. That was their family farm, right on the edge of Pisgah Forest.
All right. Gosh, that was about, what, 40 years ago?
It's getting close to that. Oh yeah, I'm sure it was that now. And we just built on it when we could. And then when Bill retired, we got back.
So you came and lived there permanently. What I should say, though, is that while you still have the property, you have moved down to Black Mountain now to Highland Farms. And so you're closer to everything. You don't have to travel quite so far to get to things.
Yeah, that was, you know, as long as we didn't have any medical problems, we never thought of leaving Bluff Mountain.
Right.
But then Bill had so many that we needed to get nearer to the hospital and the doctors.
That makes very good sense. I remember going out to your house, and when you gave me directions that I had to open the gate and be sure not let the cows out.
And the next gate.
And then be sure to close that gate behind me and then open the next gate. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I am really out in the sticks. I love that house, though. It's a charming place. I must confess I'm glad that you are closer to things now. It's much, much easier. And that Bill's in good health, and that's great news, too. Let's talk a little about Mars Hill as the college. It was easier, obviously, for you to become involved in Mars Hill once you all moved to Hot Springs because you were in the county. Do you remember the first thing you ever did over here at the college? What brought you here first? I know there were elder hostels and classes. Do you remember what happened that brought you here first?
I'm not sure, but I think that I did the festival, the Lunsford Festival. I think it was about 1970, a couple of years after it started. Right. And
was Ed Howard involved?
It was Ed Howard, yeah. And then I taught summer school.
And that's just regular summer classes?
Yeah, I've taught summer what they call summer hostel. But then I think it was about 1979, we started Elder Hostel. And it was the best elder hostel in the state. They told us that.
I know.
It was Dr. Underwood doing history and culture. It was Don McLeod doing flora and fauna. And I did music and folklore. And some years I did dance, but mostly music and folklore. And we did that. We had big classes. We had about 40, 45 people in our classes.
And you told me people would come back year after year and take it again.
The first year we did that and it worked so well, we said, oh, we'll do it again. And so I looked up at that first day and I said, saw 16 people who'd been there the year before.
That's quite a compliment.
And I said, I believe I better rethink this class outline. And they said, oh no, that's why we came back. Don't change it.
Don't change it. Well, I had heard wonderful things about that, the venture that you all did. It was clearly a great pleasure for people who traveled from everywhere to find all three of you, because Dr. Underwood was such a wonderfully articulate historian, and then Don knew everything about flora and fauna, and the students here loved to go on trips with him around the area, you know, to see things.
There was one thing that I will never forget. It was about 1977, and they decided that we're just beginning to think about Appalachian studies.
Right.
And so they decided to invite alumni to come back for a week of Appalachian studies. And they asked me to set it up. And it was such a fun week. We didn't have a big crowd, but we got really good reviews. And I remember I wrote a whole page, double lines of poetry about that week, because it was just a lot of fun. But we had good people here. Ron Eller was here, and
That's
Dr.
right.
Jolly, and we had lots of good musicians. Gary Spence and I think they made the Smathers family, and we just had really good people.
You told me once, and I thought it was interesting, that it was probably that out of that experience, the college became very much focused on the Appalachian heritage, so that people here, students here, would have a sense of where the school had come from, for one thing.
That's what they said. Students had never really been given much of a sense of where they were.
Right. And there was not an appreciation for the heritage of Appalachia in the way that has evolved since, and you all were probably pioneers.
That was true all over. It wasn't just Mercy. It was about that time that we started meeting together, the Appalachian Studies Conference.
Right. The Appalachian Consortium grew out of all
Now
that.
it's huge.
It is huge. Jim Thomas formed the Southern Appalachian Repertory Theater about that time in 1975, and he has said many times that one of the reasons he was so insistent in the planning for that organization, which is still around, after 35 years, was that he felt that there were too many people who had cliched notions and views of Appalachia. And he was, or Appalachia, whichever pronunciation, he was concerned that it was wrong, that he needed to set things straight. He always worked very hard to be sure that we preserved as accurately as we could that wonderful heritage, and not make it cliched as some people from the outside see this reason.
Well, you said Appalachia or Appalachia. One of the people that we had several times was Dr. Curtis Williams,
Yes,
who was the
remember
provost at Appalachian State.
I remember him.
Because his thing was the language, and he was wonderful with that. But he always said, if you want to know how to pronounce it, Snake says Eve, if you try to deceive, I'll throw this Appalachian.
That's wonderful. That's a wonderful memory. It's funny, I had heard that story before, and I also am always amused when people say, you can say Appalachian State University, but when you refer to Aaron Copland's music, it's the Appalachian Spring. It's not translated Appalachian Spring in the same way for some reason.
I've always thought it was really strange that people from other regions even think they know better how to pronounce it than the people who live here. That's always been a little bit strange to me.
A little bit strange. Tell me, I was interested, when you were a young girl, I know you had two sisters, and the three of you had a trio, and you sang together. I heard you say that you you got elected to sing. You were the eldest, and so you got elected to sing harmony parts.
Oh yeah, always sang harmony.
How does that, has that been confusing for you later on when you've worked as a solo person?
No. I can sing harmony with anybody.
And you played the violin and the viola?
Yeah, I did from 5th grade through high school. That's what I played. And then I kind of got away from it, and when I went to college, I was so busy doing other things, I guess.
And didn't somebody tell me that you decided it was easier to carry around a guitar to accompany yourself, and so you bought a book that says how to teach yourself guitar?
Actually, we camped a lot. That's all. Our vacations were always camping because that's all we could afford, really, when the children were growing up. And so Bill tells this story of we were camping. I think he's up at Julian Price Park, and the ranger had a guitar, and he came by and we sang, and I had been to camps. I'd been camp counselor. I knew all the old songs and all the old songs my dad knew and everything else, and so he says that I said, we need something to sing to. You can't sing to a violin. So he said that they gave me a $16 guitar and a free how to use it book for Christmas. So that's his story.
That's his story. Is it still a story?
It's a good story.
Well, I'm always amazed when I see you when you're working with instruments, because you play the guitar, the dulcimer, the banjo, and the psaltery. Oh, do you play anything else?
Auto harp.
Oh, of course, auto harp. I remember that. Oh, you just drag out all these things, and it's so simple. I'm always agog as I watch you play, because it seems like to me that there's no effort for you to do all this.
Oh, there's effort, all right, but it does have to have strings on it.
Did I read somewhere that you, when learning to play the psaltery, had never had any experience doing that, so you created your own method?
Well, there are no books and no teachers, and I'd only heard one person, that was Bob Beers, who promised to help me. He promised to help me get one built and learn to play it, and he was killed in an automobile accident. So I didn't. His son-in-law gave me a 30-minute lesson. And I had a sound tape, no video, and that's what you need, is the video to see what he did with his hands. So I just had to work it out. And I think it is, when people say, oh, I want to play that, I have to think whether they're the kind, if you're the kind of person who likes to work things out for yourself, then that's your instrument.
And that's it.
Yeah, but don't count on any pictures and diagrams and teachers and all that, you know.
I'm sure that people watching you play the psaltery now think that you must have had some incredible experience to have arrived at your way of doing it, because it probably is not the way that other people do it.
No, it isn't. It isn't even the way Eric, his son-in-law, did it. I use different fingers for different things because it just seemed better to me. You're playing the melody in the bass a lot, but then you come back to the treble to do arpeggios on the. Well, when you come back, if you use the same finger that you were using there, it didn't work for me.
So you figured out your own method.
I figured out my own method.
I know that you were born in Rowan County in 1926 and went to what was then Women's College in Greensboro, now UNCG, and they honored you some years back for service. What was do you remember what that?
It was Distinguished Alumni.
Distinguished Alumni. I knew that there was.
I loved that college, though, you know.
So that was a very special.
I always liked to go to school. It's what it is, but I loved that school.
Well, it's it has maintained its luster over the years, even though it became part of the university system and everybody, not just women. but it still has. And has a great theater program too. You know, I've kept up with that over the years.
Yeah, it does. And we've had, I don't know the new president, chancellor, but I did know the other, and I thought she was just really special. And maybe one reason why it's been so good.
Been so good. And so when you and Bill were down in Atlanta, you went on and did your master's degree at Georgia State. Mm-hmm. And at that part in your life, you really were primarily an educator. You were teaching and working. Was there a particular age group that you mostly worked with? Or?
Well, I was in the early childhood as far as classroom teaching, and I wrote curriculum. Right. For about 20 years. I wrote curriculum for early childhood.
And did you create your songbook for young people at that point? Was that the era?
I wrote Open Court Publishers in Illinois. I met the publisher at an early childhood conference in Atlanta, and he was doing a new program. He had people to do language arts and math and thinking skills and all of that. And I was really impressed because some of those were people writing the textbooks that we had in graduate school. And he said somebody told him, I was a lead teacher in a school that was all early childhood. And somebody told him what I was doing to get music in all the classrooms, and he asked me if I would be interested in working with him to see what I could do. And so he paid me to do what he asked. He'd say, give me a list of 25 songs that young children ought to know. Write me an outline for a year, for years in early childhood. Write me lesson plans for classroom teachers, because there aren't many music teachers, so you have to aim your work at classroom teachers. And I did all that, and he said he'd never had that much work from anybody in that amount of time. And Bill said, well, she's not really sitting there making that up, she's writing down what she's been doing.
Yeah.
But then I did, for a long time, I did visiting artist things especially for Georgia Arts Council and DeKalb Arts Council. I did some month-long residencies for Georgia Arts Council.
Were they fun?
Yeah, and there were a lot of them in middle schools. Would you believe that?
Yes, I would.
Because I always found if you can go into an elementary school and they're just ready for you. But if you have a month with middle school, they can do an awful lot, and it works out. I bet I've done more middle schools than anybody in the state of Georgia while I was there. But I also did a lot of colleges too. So I did years of, when we were in Georgia, of visiting artists things.
Do people still use the book that you put together of the songs?
Yeah, the first one now was Open Court, and the sister that the Karases, they were German and did beautiful readers. They know Dick and Jane. It was, a lot of them were traditional stories, and I went one time there when the artwork was there. They had beautiful artwork. And so after about 18 years, we had done some minor changes, but the sister in that group wanted to redo the whole thing. And the brothers didn't want to spend the money, so she bought out my contract and formed Children's Music Workshop, and I wrote K through 2 for her.
That's an exciting progression, for goodness sake. That went on for a very long time.
It did.
That's wonderful. But and you put together, I know, I wanted to ask, that this would be a good time to talk about it. I know that you have been going to the John C. Campbell Folk School. How long have you been involved out there?
Goodness, I started going there I think in the 70s too. I was on the board of directors for about 10 years, but I'm still teaching.
You're
there.
still teaching, and I know
Yeah.
that this book that we have right here, folk school songbook, and when I've been out to the folk school into in their shop, you know, this is one of the most requested things. And how many times have they republished it?
This is the first time they're redoing it now. That's the old copy because we don't have the new one yet.
Well, I'm
but
delighted.
They are redoing.
Have you made many changes in it from the beginning edition?
No, I don't think they're doing much. Bob Dalsimer is doing it. He's the music and dance man.
Right.
And he gave me a few things that he wanted to know what I thought about it. But I think it's going to be pretty much like it was.
When I've seen you out there, and you got me involved once out there,
Yeah.
so you and I were there the
Yeah.
same week. When I saw you working, you were teaching, I believe, a dulcimer class at that point. Is that right?
I teach a lot of dulcimer classes.
What is the attraction about that? Why do people want to learn the dulcimer?
I think that there are a lot of people that we have coming to those classes who've never played an instrument. And I do think that if you're going to have a one-week course, this is the easiest. At least I think so now. I think it would be harder to do that, to go that far with a violin or a guitar. But it is we have had at Appalachian State and at Western 250 people in those weeks.
How do you handle that many people?
Oh, I have a big staff. And this year, it's going to be Lois Hornbostel, who has run those at both places. She is having one that is like 10 minutes from where I live now.
Oh, neat.
At the YMCA Blue Ridge Assembly in Black Mountain.
Yes, it's a wonderful place.
And it is a wonderful place. So I hope that she has this. I'm going to be able to teach there this year.
Oh, good for you. That is
yeah.
delightful. I've been so pleased that you've kept that going with your teaching out at the folk school. And I know you've been very much involved in the history of the folk school, Olive Campbell, and that whole story of her work and how that place was formed. I was interested several years ago when Hollywood made a film called The Songcatcher that supposedly might have been based on. Was it sort of supposed to be based on her, do you think?
They said that it wasn't based on
I gathered that you felt that it was not.
No, it's probably more like Dorothy Scarborough. She came in the 30s, and Bascom Lunsford took her around in his old car, and she did have a small little very portable
Recording machine. Yes.
machine. Not that thing they were dragging over the rocks in the movie, you know. And guess what the name of her book was?
I don't know.
A Songcatcher in the Southern Mountains.
Southern Mountains.
See, and they never gave her any credit. I don't know, maybe they thought that people would know the name Olive Campbell, although I'm not sure how many people know her name either, but she was not, see, Dorothy Scarborough was a college professor.
At Columbia University, wasn't
Yeah, Columbia. And Olive Campbell was never a college professor.
Right.
And she never tried to, she never tried to sell anything. She just worked with Cecil Sharp. She brought him to the Southern Mountains, and that was a very good pair. They got along well. There was no, and it was a difficult time in her life when he was here. She lost a couple of children during that time, but John Campbell got him around a lot, and they knew everybody in the area at that time. There's an incredible group of people working in the southern mountains.
I gathered from what you had said, because I know you reviewed that movie for the Appalachian Journal, that you felt that the depiction itself, not only of the times and the people, that you felt maybe the way the music was done also was not particularly.
It was the best chance they ever had of doing it, and I thought that the old woman, Mary Jane Queen, did a wonderful job of coaching her. And I thought Sheila Adams did a good job with the young...
Emmy Rossum.
Yeah. I thought that they had a really good chance of, you know, and to me, the old woman was the best part of the
So that
music,
probably Hollywood really missed getting it right from the standpoint of what was true and accurate to...
Yeah, the only, you know, the ones that were full-length songs, like Emmylou Harris sang Barbie Allen with the full orchestra at the end.
Yes.
But the little singer, the young singer, only got bits of
songs.
ballads. She
Right.
didn't
Get the
get
whole-
to sing
right.
whole ballads. Maybe they thought we
Wouldn't notice?
wouldn't sit still for a whole ballad, but we would, you
Well,
know.
while we were talking about the song catcher, I want to move to another topic, and this leads me right into it. Guess what I'm holding here? I'm holding Sharon McCrum's book, The Song Catcher,
Yeah.
which is indeed not the same story.
No.
But one of the nice things about this book, if you turn it open to the dedication page, she says, "For my friends of song," and the first person she mentions here is Betty Smith. So Sharon has dedicated this book called The Song Catcher to you. And I'm one of the lucky people who's had a chance to see you and Sharon perform a couple of times. And I want to have you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Sharon McCrum, who's the novelist. How did all that happen?
Well, we knew each other mostly from Appalachian Studies things, and I had read her books, but this was early on, and she was, and I were at a conference. It was women's, I'm not sure, I've forgotten the name of it, but it was a women's conference in Ohio. And Charlotte Ross was there. And we actually, the three of us, did a session. And then that night, I was supposed to do a 30-minute thing, and then Sharon would do I was supposed to do music, and then she would do a reading. And when I started to go up, she said, "Don't leave the stage when you get through." And I said, And she said, "I want you to do some songs." And I said, "Like, which ones?" Of course.
Yes.
"You know them all," she said. "I used your recordings when I was when she wrote If Ever I Return Pretty Peggy O, you know, the
Yes.
first ballad.
I know that. She talked
And
about
she
hearing
said-
you on the radio.
Yeah, she used Little Margaret and she used Knoxville Girl, I think. Anyhow, there were several. She said she listened to that when she was writing it. So I said, "How do I know when to sing? If I know the songs, how do I know when to sing?"
Right.
She said, "You'll know." And the amazing thing was that college girl who was doing the lights and the sound, that's probably the best that's ever been done. You know, the girl she just was right on. She listened to Sharon, and Sharon would, you know, you could tell when she wanted you to do
sing the
something.
song.
And she would turn the light on, turn the spot off here, turn it
Yes.
on me, and switch the sound. And the thing just, Bill has always said that was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen, because we've done lots of those things and we've never had it done better than that.
I saw it twice. I saw you do it twice. In both cases, there was not a special lighting. They just were places that didn't have the lights. But it is a magical, it's a magical idea, and it works so wonderfully. First of all, I think we should explain that Charlotte Ross was also a storyteller.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you were the one that Sharon chose to do this project. And also, she wrote a series of novels called the Ballad Novels, and they're all based on ballads, and they use ballad titles, the song titles. And this Peggy, this wonderful story that you mentioned was her first novel in the ballad series. It's a delightful thing because it seems as though you both intuit when the next song is supposed to come, or the narrative. It's a delightful way to do it.
We've done it most of the time with just my doing the songs,
Right.
you know. But then we did one at the library over in West Asheville or somewhere. Where was it? Fairview, where we did both Jane Gentry and we combined. That's what they asked for,
Right.
and we combined.
Well, the audiences just love it. It's so totally unexpected. You know, you both are masters at what you do, and that you've married that material so well. It's just amazing to me. I was so glad I had a chance to see it again. If you ever do it the next time, please let me know when you're going to go to do it. So I can
Yeah,
go.
she's been writing different things.
Yeah, she's
That's why
gone
we
too.
have.
Oh.
But I think she'll get back
Yeah.
to it. I think she has gotten back
Good.
to
I'm
it.
glad. Her series about car racing was not very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know any car racing songs, see, so there's no point in asking me to do that.
That was
I might figure out a train song, but
Yeah.
not car racing.
Car racing, I know. I thought that was kind of funny. Most people don't know, in addition to your work as an educator and as a musician, that you also have an ability with textiles and weaving. And how did that all come into your life?
You know, it's just, I just have always wanted to do too many things, I guess.
Would you
And
do that
I
as a
did
girl?
have, no, I didn't do, I knitted. And I sewed, you know, my mother and my grandmother sewed beautifully, and I pulled out more than I sewed, but I learned to sew. But I knitted in college. I would knit those argyle socks. I don't know if
I remember
you're
those.
too young to know
No,
about argyle
I wore
socks.
argyle socks. That was a big deal.
Yeah, but I had a friend also named Betty Smith who lived around the corner from me when we lived in Georgia, in Marietta. And her husband and Bill had both worked for Hewlett-Packard since Hewlett and Packard were there.
Yeah.
You know, and she was an excellent weaver, and so my daughter and Jan and I both bought looms and learned to weave from the other Betty Smith, or we started there, and then we took courses at the folk school, and I got into spinning, and I'm still doing that. I don't have room for a loom where I am, but I do a lot of spinning. And one reason was the people who taught it. Norman Kennedy was a Scottish ballad singer and weaver, spinner, and he always taught the old way. Looms are looms, spinning wheels are spinning wheels,
Right.
no matter how they look.
Right.
And where else am I going to find a teacher who sings ballads while we're
That's right.
weaving?
I was going to say it's perfect.
You know,
Yeah.
so I took all of them that he taught, and there was another teacher there that I really liked, and I would take her courses. But Jan and I would go, and they would give us a week together, you know. And I found when we've been moving out of our house on Bluff Mountain boxes, I didn't realize I had woven that much stuff that I didn't have, that I'd forgotten about.
For goodness sake.
You know.
Well, that leads us logically into something I wanted to talk about, in fact, to show us. In Boy Hill Chapel, there is a wonderful gift which hangs on the wall, 2 gifts, which hang on the wall, which you wove, and they're there. Would you like to talk? Could you tell us about those if we look at those? We're in the vestibule of the Broy Hill Chapel, and I've asked Betty to explain the history and origin of how she got the commission to do the 2 wall hangings for the chapel. Betty, tell us about this and how it came to be.
Well, Dr. Bentley wanted 2 wall hangings, and so he asked Richard Dillingham, because Richard was weaving on that old loom in the museum, and Richard said, "I only do rugs, you call Betty." So he did, and he asked me to bring some yarn and ideas over. I took wool, I took pearl cotton, I took a lot of, several different kinds of yarn, and I took silk. And he said he wanted silk. Well, I went back and I checked on the cost of silk and found it was going to be rather expensive. And so I called him and I said, pearl cotton looks just like silk. He said, "No, you get the silk, I'll get the money." And so he did. He got one person to give the money for one wall hanging, another for the other. It got 2 different people to give the money for the hardware to hang them. And
Does silk have a longer life wear than cotton?
Yeah, there will, cotton and wool can have something, have insects get into them.
Right.
Silk, you just don't have much with silk. And so I did 2 patterns with, weavers will know that they're called name patterns. And this one I called Laurel of Mars Hill, and took that name and made an original pattern. But this is like overshot patterns that you see on coverlets.
What does the word overshot mean?
It means that you've got your warp is the white, and the blue is the
secondary.
Yeah, that is what makes the pattern.
Got it.
And it's called overshot because it is shot literally over that white warp.
And do you do a sketch to get an idea of what you want it to look like?
Yeah, when you do your pattern, you can see what it's going to look like. That else you wouldn't know whether to go forth with it.
Right. Is there symbolism in the pattern you chose, Betty?
Well, I chose the name Laurel of Mars Hill, and the other one I called Jubilee. Since it was in the chapel, I decided the other one, this one is blue, the other one is a rust color. And it was very nerve-wracking, I will say, because there was such an investment in the yarn, but he was right. Dr. Bentley knew exactly what he wanted.
And
yeah.
What was his response once you showed him the finished product?
Well, he seemed pleased with it.
So,
yeah.
So that's it.
But he did. He had different. That's the way they were built in this chapel at the time.
Yes.
About 50% of this building was
done by volunteer labor.
Volunteer labor.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about the fringe. Is it also a silk?
Yeah, this is silk. You can really see that silk on the fringe. Yeah, the whole thing is.
Good. Let's look at the other one.
This is kind of the elongated pattern from here to here, here to here.
So on the top then you had an elongated pattern and a repeat of that at the bottom.
Yeah. But this one, I just used the word Jubilee.
Just Jubilee.
And did a pattern using that name.
And you were explaining a moment ago that in the French, that's all not
This is all done by
hand.
just hand done.
Tell me about the piece at the top that goes over the rod. Is it
That's just plain weave.
just plain weave?
Yeah. So that's usually, when you're doing a wall hanging, you usually do something.
Is it
that's
silk
close.
also?
Yeah, it's silk.
It seems much more durable.
Well, it's more closely woven, but you need that when it's,
Going to hang.
yeah, it's going to hang from there.
What was different about this one from the other one?
He wanted two different colors. He picked those colors
Oh.
that,
And in your book about Jane Gentry, which is a treasure and which has won all kinds of awards, you have included, how many songs of hers have you included?
I put all of them in
They're
there.
all in here. And
All that he collected
they're
from
all
her.
here.
Yeah.
One of the treasures also, in addition to her songs in here, is that you've included some of the jacktails that she told.
There was a woman, Isabel Gordon Carter. She was a sociologist who came from Knoxville, I think, over. She collected her mostly, jacktails, fairy tales, grandfather tales, as well as riddles. She loved riddles,
Yeah.
and Miss Carter collected those too.
And you've got some of these in here too.
That's why we have that. We think it's probably the only historical marker in the country that says balladry.
Well, I think it's wonderful. People who go to Hot Springs always notice it. And I was interested in looking at your book, the photographs of that house where Jane lived. It looks the same today. It had a white fence around it in the early days, but to go in, now it's a bed and breakfast place. But it's been preserved. It seems to be really well.
Inside it still looks pretty
Very much
like
like
when
it
she
did.
lived there.
Right. I was amazed that even that was back as far back as the 20s that she was living. She died in 1925.
Yeah.
That she lived there a long time, and that house has been preserved. So your book not only has become a marvelous resource, it has become a textbook for all kinds of people.
That really surprised me, but it has, it's been used ever since it came out. Cece Conway's used it in her folklore classes at ASU, but it has been used, it was used at University of Tennessee, and it's used at Lenore Ryan in a ballads class. It's been used it's on the list at MIT for their folklore.
Well, for all of us.
It's on a lot of reading lists in colleges. I understand they used it at Boston College in the folklore, but the reason they use it is because there aren't many what you would call contextual studies where you have the biography, but you also have the materials.
That's right. So it seems to be one of the most exciting things for anybody who is at all interested in this period and this kind of music is you've got the biography, and you indeed have then the music too. And that's a wonderful part.
Well, Bill Malone, I always call him, he's the historian of country music.
Yeah.
And he was teaching classes at both Duke and Carolina in women's music, and I had to go down and do some things from the book.
Right.
For
Well, the
him.
University of Kentucky Press published it, and so for people who might want to know more about this, your website, BettySmithBallads.com, all the information is there, so people can find it there. Well, of course, Jane Gentry's story doesn't end with the book, and you and I know what happened after that. And I remember you and I had an informal discussion about 1993 after I had written a one-person show about Stephen Foster. And you mentioned then that you were interested in possibly doing it. I didn't know what that was going to be.
Well, I had done this thing that, it was like would be doing readings and then doing the music. And Richard Dillingham said, you need to see Robert Jones look at this. And you said, I don't know if you remember it, but you said, why don't you write a real play?
Oh, I don't know that I remember that.
And I said, because I don't know how. And you said, then I'll teach you. And you did.
Well, we had fun. I remember that vividly. It's one of the few times in my life I ever had a class with just one student.
But that was the most marvelous class I ever had. I mean, it was like, for 2 years, I had a one-on-one.
Well, it was a wonderful experience for me, too, because how often does somebody, as a teacher, get the chance to work with a legend? And you were a very apt student. The things that I would suggest, and you'd go home and redo and work with. I was very happy with what you did. Your final product, which is called A Mountain Riddle, and which had its premiere, believe it or not, here in Mars Hill at the elementary school. The first performance you really did was over at the elementary school.
Either that or the folk school, I've forgotten. But
No,
I've done it a couple of times there. But
right.
The thing is that it's been done in a lot of places. I haven't done it recently, but I did it at Shepherd College in a building, a Revolutionary War era building up there. I did it at Writers Week at Heinemann on a tiny little stage with probably the most critical audience I'll ever have.
And Heinemann's in Kentucky.
Yeah, and they were all writers.
And you did it somewhere in California, I know.
I did it for the Gentry family reunion, and they have one of the 9 children went west before the turn of the century, and as a tutor. So there are people, Gentry family in Washington, Alaska, California, and they have a reunion there, and then they have one in Hot Springs.
Well, I remember the Hot Springs performance when you told me you were going to do the play. First of all, it's called A Mountain Riddle, and it's about 45 minutes long, isn't it? And
well, it's probably closer to an hour since I put one little part in there that I do sometimes.
Sometimes
not when I do schools,
with children.
Elementary schools, but then
with the adults, you can.
Yeah.
The nice thing is you can plug in songs as you feel that you'd like to. It's not
Right.
necessarily locked into specific songs all the time. It was written with a young audience in mind, but it also works for adults.
Well, actually, at first it was kind of for adults, but then we knew that we could get funded if we would do it for schools.
Yes.
So I put in more things that I thought, more songs that kids would like,
Kids
some
would like.
riddles.
Right, and it does work for children. We've seen it work for children with
One
schools.
of the best audiences I had was that senior English group at Madison County High.
And they liked it.
Yeah, they wrote the best reviews. They even printed some of them in the newspaper
nice.
because they weren't. You knew they weren't copied off the chalkboard. They were
real.
They were all different.
They were all different. I remember the day I was starting to say about the time of performance you gave in Sunnybank, where here you are portraying Jane Gentry herself. You're the solo person on stage, and you are Jane Gentry in a house where she once lived. And there are her relatives, her children, grandchildren, around sitting watching you. And I remember thinking, what a surreal experience. I'm not sure as an actor I could have done that. That must have been terribly...
Well, and in her church. And
that's right, in the Presbyterian church.
With her, that's where she went to church. And there were some of her granddaughters and great-granddaughters.
Were you nervous?
There. Well, when I looked up and I saw, remember that one of the characters was her daughter Lala,
yes,
who was
I remember.
Thought to be the most beautiful of all, And I gave her kind of, you said that everybody couldn't get along all the time, and so I gave Lala, you know, a role where she was causing a little trouble.
I remember.
And I looked up, and there were 2 of her daughters. And after it was over, I said, I hope you didn't mind the role that I gave your mother. And they just cracked up. They said, you chose the right one. And they were just laughing.
They got it.
And they've been, some of those people, they came to West Georgia when I did it. They came, one of them drove, a great-granddaughter drove down from Vermont and saw it at West Georgia and in somewhere else. I did it in Georgia that weekend. Anyhow, I couldn't believe they, and then she's the one who invited me to California.
Well, I think that it's important for people to realize that not only did you write the play, but you also perform it. And what most people don't know when they see it is that your husband, Bill, figured out how to put it all together in such a way you could pack it in your van and truck it everywhere.
Yes.
I was amazed at what he came up
Well,
with. You
I
know.
had such a time. I would say to people, I will bring a little rocker, a spinning wheel, and just the small things.
Mm-hmm.
But you will have to get me
A kitchen table.
a kitchen table and at least 3 chairs, and you know, and like at Heinemann on a little stage with a big table. See, when I told Mike, I said, I need old stuff. He said, well, you know, that's all we have here. You're in good shape. But the table and chairs were so, I about had to step off the stage in order.
Well, that was
you
so
remember
huge.
I have to run around the table?
Yeah, I remember.
I couldn't run around the table. Same thing happened. I did it on Jekyll Island at the inn, or what they call their snowbirds. And the furniture just filled up the whole stage. So Bill made me a table that comes apart.
Yes, I remember. I was so delighted that he figured that out, so you didn't have that problem
Yeah,
anymore.
and my mother had given me 3 chairs, but they're small. They're just made smaller than most chairs are, you
Right,
know.
right.
But they look old.
Now, are you going to continue to do it, Betty?
I really think I'm going to learn. I'm going to have to just do like a, see, at first you said, now that it's done, you have to learn it. And I said, you know I can't learn all this. And you said, how many songs do you know? And I said, I didn't learn them all at one time. And you said, I'm going to show you how, and you'd shown me how to write the play. I figured you could show me how to learn it, and you did.
Well, you still remember most of it, I'm sure.
I know how, and I can do that again if I put my mind to it.
Well, it's a charming story, and it's a great. It seems like to me it's a great kind of extension of what you did here. This is accessible to scholars, but the play is accessible to everybody. You know, they get to see Jane come alive, and
a friend of ours, I've done a couple of residencies down on the coast of Georgia, on St. Simon's, one of them, and in Brunswick, and some of those people came when I did the play. And the husband of one of those teachers, who he was such a wonderful man, and he said when it was over, he said, "You just became Jane." He had read the book, you know, and I thought, well, that's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me.
That's a nice compliment, I think so. Well, it's a great success for you, both as a book and as a play. And not everybody has a chance to do all of that with the same character and extended as you have done.
I guess that I just kept wanting to tell people about Jane.
Yes. Well, I think that was probably one of your missions in life, don't you think?
Maybe so. I just, it kind of grew like Topsy, you know.
Yeah.
That there's a magazine called the Tar Heel Junior Historian, goes out to history classes, and they said they wanted to do a music issue, and would I do an article? And so I sent them a list, and on the list was Jane Gentry, and they said, do that. And after I did it, they said, now don't stop working on that, because when we get the new Museum of History open, first thing we're gonna do is North Carolina women.
So that's
and they said, you need to be working on this. Well, the museum didn't open. But in the meantime, I wrote a 10-page paper for the Appalachian Studies Journal. And they had not been publishing whole papers. They'd only been doing abstracts. But they published my whole paper. And so then I did, what else did I do? But the museum didn't open, but they had the Women's History Project. So I did another 10-page paper on the bearer of a cultural treasure, I think is what I called it. And so by the time I got through writing all those articles and papers, I said, I believe if I do I kept doing a little more research. And I thought, well, if I do it, and I got some of those people that knew her, they all had died within a very short time. They were all in their 80s. And
so you were lucky then to have gotten to talk to as many as you did.
Oh, yeah. If I'd waited around much longer,
you would have missed
I would have missed those.
Right. Well, you know what's interesting to me is not only did your book win all kinds of awards, but the play itself won the Paul Green Award for the North Carolina Historical Society. I was impressed that they saw that your work extended in another form altogether, and you're still winning awards.
Well, it was the Society of Historians. You know, you won an award there.
That was for treasures later on, but it was nice. They saw that as history, and it is history. Obviously, it clearly is history. One of and you and I've talked about this. That as you have done so many things, and people have discovered you not only here, but I know recently you did an interview with the BBC from Scotland. What was that like, Betty? What kinds of things did they want to know from you?
Well, what they were doing was they were telling the history of Scottish music, and they sent me the DVD of the first program they did, because that's the one I was in. I wish I had the rest of them, and I would love to see it done on. It would have to be a series, I'm sure, because this one must be an hour long. But they started off with where the bagpipes came from the Middle East, and then they came across to this country and to Nova Scotia, came down, and actually, for me, they wanted it done. We did it in Miss Gentry's house. And we did the False Night in the Road, one of her ballads. And so I was a part of the very traditional part of it.
Great.
But it's very well done, and we need to see the whole thing. They went all the way, came down the East Coast, and went to Nashville. And showed how the music had changed. How
a song could change throughout all those periods. Yeah. What was your experience like? I know that you have done other interviews with other kinds of people. Did you feel along the way that they captured not only a sense of Appalachian culture and all of this, but do you feel that there's I know you mentioned at some point that you felt today in schools that young people were not learning these songs. They were not growing up. They've got TV and computers, and they don't hear people singing these songs. Is your your kind of era of these songs, is it dying, do you think?
Well, I think there are people deliberately learning them. You know, there are young people in Madison County who are learning, but they're learning the songs. I don't know that they've always known them, but maybe I see more of that in this area than anywhere else. But there's still some
Those songs are
festivals
still
going
out
on.
there.
But now, when I taught early childhood, of course, I was teaching children who didn't get a whole lot of adult help anyhow. But they only knew things like TV jingles. They didn't know nursery rhymes. They didn't know little songs. Like my dad had a little saying or a little song for everything.
And they didn't know those.
Like, here I stand upon a stump, come and kiss me before I jump. No, they don't know. And those are the things that bring people together when they all, in families, they all know the same thing, or communities,
Right.
or whatever, where people are in any kind of group, it's things they know that.
So you think these songs in this tradition will continue despite all the modern things that come along to take it away?
Well, they aren't being just sung by everybody. We know that,
No,
don't
we're
we?
not. That's very true. But there are
I
pockets
hope
of
so.
people still around.
There are pockets
Who
of
keep it on.
people around here.
I was interested in something you said in something you wrote about the fact that the songs, the traditional songs, that, like Barbara Ellen, for example, there are versions of it everywhere, and you'd go to down east somewhere, and they're singing it down there. They've learned it.
Oh, yeah.
So everywhere there's a kind of consciousness about these old songs.
I did colleges down east, and I had people sing Barbara Allen for me down there.
Yeah, right.
It was a different version,
But it was still the same
it was
thing.
still Barbara Allen.
Still, yeah. Tell me where does Betty Smith go at this point? You've had this distinguished career. It's such incredible things you've accomplished. What are your next projects?
I'm teaching a dulcimer class at Highland Farms. What else? I hadn't been there any time until people started coming and saying, I have this instrument under the bed and I've never learned to play it. So almost from the time I went there, I've had this class. And we have a sing-along every month. We have played for 2 of the sing-alongs.
I think that's wonderful. Have you done Mountain Riddle for them yet?
No, I got to relearn it, but...
Well, it would be fun if they could see you do it and also use some of
But
these
this
instruments.
time, we're going to have one next week. And we are doing a round called Music Alone Shall Live. And our dulcimer group is doing a round playing and singing. Now, I think that's pretty good
I
for
think you're
beginners.
absolutely right. That's very
and
good.
And then what they want to do, once we do it, they want the whole group to do it. Now,
Good.
we may be biting off more than we can chew, but we're going to try it.
I can hear this, see the headlines now. All of Black Mountain is playing dulcimer and having a giant concert being led by Betty Smith. Before we finish our chat, I need to ask you about the children, where they are and what they're doing.
Well, Bill and his wife Pam are still in Charlottesville, Virginia. But they have bought a house on the Outer Banks where they intend in about 3 years to retire.
To retire. Nobody in the family wants the cabin, your house in Mont Springs?
Well, they all love fishing on the coast.
Got it.
And Jan and Ed are about 50 miles north of Atlanta. And they all go for 2 weeks every summer. They go to the Outer Banks and fish. And I know that's what they're going to do. So we all decided that we might as well. We don't need to keep that house if they're not going to be there.
If they're not going to go there. Well, it's been a lovely house, and it's been a great...
But it's been, well, we hated to see it go. Well, it hasn't gone yet, but because we all worked on it, and our children and all all our friends and all their friends, everybody worked on that house. So
it has a lot of family history.
Yeah, it does.
Right.
But you know what we have had to learn, and it has been a hard lesson, but we've just had to learn that we have to say, we did that, we loved it, but now we're going to do something else.
Right.
Because you can't go from a house to an apartment and carry everything with you.
And speaking of that, by the way, I should say that the college is very grateful that you have given many of your papers and artifacts for the collection here, so that people long after us can enjoy those. That was a lovely thing to do.
I will have some more for them.
Yeah.
I gave them all the dulcimers that I consider historical dulcimers, and I do. You know, I've given them the Bard Ray materials from that festival,
Right.
and the all of the Cecil Sharp manuscripts, and you know, I've given them the Jane Gentry research materials, but I have scrapbooks full of things.
But you're still using many things, yeah.
And there are just some things I can't let go
Yeah,
yet.
surely. Yeah, the same way with me. I have things all over the house I'm still using.
Yeah, I gave them, I let them take all the books they wanted, but I had removed the ones that I just
Still have to
couldn't
use,
part
of course,
with,
of
you
course.
know.
I asked you in preparation for getting together this afternoon if you would do us a song, and it would be a lovely way, I think, to end if you would do a song of your choosing, something that you really like.
Well, one that of Jane Gentry's that I really like is one that Cecil Sharp said that was one of the most beautiful tunes that he had collected. And in fact, if you check the tunes, she sings 3 songs that are essentially the same tune, and that's not surprising. She probably didn't even realize it. But,
Right, because the words were so different, the settings were so different.
Different kinds of songs.
Right.
But this one's called The Rejected Lover.
Okay, why don't you just sing it to the camera, to all those people who are going to be watching you, and we'll end on the song. And Betty, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
I can't think of anybody I'd rather talk to than see
Thank
Robert
you.
Jones.
Thank you, and a pleasure that is returned. So we'll listen to the song.
All right. Once I courted a pretty little girl, and I loved her as my life. I'd freely give my heart and hand to make her my wife. Oh, to make her my wife. I took her by the hand, and I led her to the door. I kindly asked that pretty little girl to kiss me once more. Oh, to kiss me once more. Who will shoe your feet, my love? And who will glove your hand? Who will kiss your ruby lips when you come from the far-off land? Oh, when you come from the far-off land. My father will shoe my feet, my love. My mother will glove my hands, and you may kiss my ruby lips when you come from the far-off land. Oh, when you come from the far-off land. My being gone 6 long months, it gave her cause to complain, and she wrote me a letter saying you can't come again. Oh, you can't come again. One cold winter's night when I was out riding and a-drinking of good wine and thinking of that pretty little girl that stole this heart of mine. Oh, that stole this heart of mine. I wish I'd died when I was young, or I never had been born.
I'd never have seen those rosy cheeks, nor heard that flattering tongue. Oh, nor heard that flattering tongue.
She sat down beside me, took hold of my hand. She says, you're a stranger, and in a strange land. But if you will follow, you're welcome to go. Till we come to a little log hut in a coconut grove. Oh no, my dear maiden, this never can be. For I have my own true love in my own country. I will not forsake her, a true lover I'll be. For her heart's just as true as a little moonbeam. The last time I saw her, she stood in the sand. And as I sailed by her, she waved her small hand. And now I've come back to my own native shore. My friends and relations gather round me once more. I look all around me, but none do I see that can compare with my little Mohi. The squire came riding home at night, inquiring, where's my lady? Oh, the answer that came back to him, she's gone with a black-jack baby. Oh, she's gone